You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
For us, I think the principal constraint in the housing sector is that the access to long-term capital on reasonable terms is really, really hard to unlock in Africa.
As a member of the African diaspora myself, I know how it is profoundly important for each one of us to have a place we can call home. At home, right?
There's a real market here of people who want to invest back home. They have the resources to invest back home, but they don't have a good platform to do it because they don't know how to get started.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome back to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we explore the innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. Today, we're diving into one of the most overlooked but changing sectors on the continent: housing and real estate. For many Africans on the continent and in the diaspora, owning a home represents stability, dignity, and lasting connection to heritage. But it also represents one of the continent's biggest economic opportunities. My guests today are Robert Hornsby, co-founder and CEO of Jobomax Homes, and Franck Tcheukado, Chief Operating Officer at Jobomax. Jobomax was founded in 2014 to give Africans in the diaspora and in the region access to high-quality, reliable, and secure housing, addressing the complexities around title, financing, construction, and trust. Robert and Franck, welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast. How are you?
Thank you, Teresa. We're doing well.
Thanks, Teresa. Really glad to be here.
It's great to have you on the podcast. As always, I like to get straight into it. So let's start by trying to frame the magnitude of the challenge and the opportunity that Jobomax is addressing. What, in your view, is maybe the root cause of Africa's massive housing deficit?
All right. So none of the big problems that we face in the world can be tied down to one single source. So in the housing sector, does government play a role? Could they do a better job with clearing up land title questions and generally creating a more friendly, enabling environment for investing in the housing sector? Sure, they could do that. There are any number of things that could make things easier. For us, I think the principal constraint in the housing sector is really the same as it is in a lot of investment sectors on the continent, which is that the access to long-term capital on reasonable terms. And by reasonable, I mean, the kinds of mortgage terms, for example, that would make a house truly affordable. The access to long-term money on those kinds of terms is really, really hard to unlock in Africa. And that has to do with a variety of things. I am one of those who truly does believe that Africa in general is unfairly penalized in terms of credit ratings and ends up paying a higher cost of capital than it should. But then particularly with investments in the housing sector, if you can structure them the right way, you can really remove a lot of risk from the equation, and you should be able to unlock much more affordable capital than most people have been able to do to date. So my vote, if you had to pick one thing, it would be the lack of access to long-term capital makes it really hard to grow a housing sector.
To Bob's point, Teresa, it's difficult to pinpoint one specific root cause for the housing deficit in Africa. It's a combination of various factors. For example, you think about the massive population growth that we are currently experiencing in Africa. With a population, I've read somewhere, and don't quote me on that, that's supposed to double by 2040, and that alone is a big issue if we don't have the right infrastructures in place to adapt. You're talking about the social economic factors political factors also that play into it. So there's various reasons all combined. It's really crippling the housing sector, which is the backbone of every economy, right? Just having a very decent housing economy. And added to that, what Bob was mentioning, access to capital. To me, it's probably the easiest problem to solve because once you inject the right capital in the economy, you can get to work, right? You can start operating, executing, and solving this issue while we address the other elements that can maybe help solve the problem like more quickly. So overall, there's many factors. We could spend the entire conversation just focusing and highlighting the problems, but it's kind of all around.
Thank you for sharing that. In the intro, you mentioned that the diaspora is a huge segment of your client base. We know that the African diaspora sent over 100 billion annually in remittances. So why is so little of this money flowing into structured investments like housing?
That is a great question. And I think part of the problem is a lack of market opportunities. Part of it's a regulatory problem. If you're talking about investment coming from the U.S., for individuals to be able to invest directly in certain income requirements. And so for small entities or startup entities that are trying to provide investment opportunities on the continent, they have to be very thoughtful about those regulations. Other sources of capital in Europe and other places have those regulations, different regulations, but it's still an issue of some concern. That just creates a hurdle to creating the kinds of entities that can create those pathways to investment. In our business, we've set up two different financing companies that people anywhere in the world can invest in. Most of the investors are in the U.S. Those are separate entities, but they bring in investment, and then those entities have a contract with us to buy the payment streams that come off of the housing financings that we underwrite. So there are vehicles like that, but even those financing vehicles are, subject to those regulations that limit the types of investors they can take on. So we'll see what happens with regulations. There's certainly some discussion in the U.S. about loosening regulations and making certain kinds of private investments more available to individuals at varying income levels and varying wealth levels, but it remains to be seen what comes of that. So much of what happens with diaspora investment is happening through remittances, which unfortunately suffer a big exchange and fee tax, because if you're sending money over to friends or family for various sorts of investment and you're sending it $1,000, $2,000 at a time, you're really losing a lot of funds in that exchange transaction, depending on what your transfer mechanism is. So that's an issue. There's a big loss there. And then the other piece of the problem, and this gets to the trust question that you mentioned, and then I'll stop and let Frank talk a little bit. But many people who are sending remittances over to the continent are intending for those remittances to go into investment projects. Many of them are intending to invest in real estate projects, to build a home that they can visit or retire to or use for capital appreciation. But far too often, those funds are diverted into another project by the person that's receiving those funds. And that could be anything from building their own house to paying school fees for somebody else to just living large and blowing through all the cash and consuming it all. So the Francophone term that people use about what happens to this money is bouffer, which means to just gobble it up, right? So anyhow.
We can't talk enough about the trust aspect as it relates to Africans from the diaspora and housing in Africa. Bob mentioned the regulatory aspect could limit maybe the potential. We also have the remittances that have unfavorable rates. But even despite all that, people are still making the efforts, because as a member of the African diaspora myself, I know how it is profoundly important for each one of us to have a place we can call home, in terms of, having your own home at home, right? And, we're still making the efforts, but the lack of trust is what's just really discouraging most Africans from the diaspora for the reasons that Bob listed. And that's why we like to say at Jobomax that we don't just build homes, we sell trust, because having some type of transparency, and I know because Africans that generally move abroad do so with the intention to work hard and realize their dreams. So it hurts a lot. It hurts a lot to having your money being diverted. So that transparency is what we try to bring and make sure also they get the most bang for their buck. Because it's one thing to have the money diverted, but it's another thing also to have the money not being spent efficiently. So the trust aspect is, I think for me, it's the biggest element that's still limiting us. And we just need to be able to bring more transparency and comfort around this process.
Yes, I agree. You touched on some of the challenges or barriers for people in the diaspora and the trust element. Conversations that you have with people in the diaspora, what misconceptions do diaspora investors have about real estate back home?
There's a lot. The first thing that actually comes in mind, and I always find it funny, the first misconception, it's understanding the true cost of building, right? Like I've had being, in the operations on the ground, sometimes my biggest competition is one of the client's family members, right? Who thinks that they could build a home for much cheaper than what I'm offering. We definitely do a good job at staying competitive in the pricing, but we also have enough experience to knowing really what all goes into building a home. Sometimes you have that misconception that you can do it for half the price. And true story, our colleague John Black was here, who will probably giggle a little bit at that, is we've had clients come back to us like, hey, I thought I could do it on my own. I could do it cheaper. But it's the true understanding about the cost related to building a home to just have like a wholesome project, right? It's not just, the frame and the body work. There's a lot of details out here. The engineering aspect of it is really important just so you can have a lasting home that won't have will not be degrading quickly. So that's one thing. If I could think of just another misconception, it's one element of not feeling the sense of urgency that, just maybe bringing back investment at home, could help solve the larger issues that we have with our economy. Because I think some people are just complacent because they don't see the value that they're bringing by just like building a home, whether in Africa, whether it's for residential reasons or commercial or whatever other reason, just the job creation that goes through it, or just the improvements to our economy just from an urban standpoint, which eventually also motivates the government to do more, right? Because then when you have a community that that's being set up somewhere, then you're motivated to bring road, utilities, and such things. So it's that misconception of not understanding the true impact of making an effort to invest back home.
If I can, I'll just expand a little bit on what Frank said, because he's absolutely right. It's not understanding the full scope and the full cost. People will have, as he said, your cousin or your brother-in-law say, hey, yeah, I can get the materials and labor to build you a house for X number of dollars. Well, that's a relatively small piece of the overall cost of the project. And Frank knows this up close and personal because he's dealing right now in the field with an issue that is the kind of issue that people deal with if they don't have somebody managing the process for them that works out well. We have a neighbor next to one of our developments who has blocked off a public road that should be the road that services our clients, and has prevented access to the homes that we've built for our customers. We have a legal judgment against them. So we pursued that through the courts for several months because we're working in an environment where the wheels of justice grind slowly, right? Regardless of how clearly mapped out your case is on publicly available documents. So, we have a legal judgment against them. Frank is on site now. He had people from the U.S. Embassy coming to look at the situation to see how they might support us because it's not immediately clear that the government's going to enforce the legal order. And so these are the kinds of things that if you're living thousands of miles away and it's not a dedicated, professional, reasonably well-resourced organization fighting on your behalf, it's just your cousin or your brother-in-law that didn't read the title right, or that's being defrauded and doesn't have the legal firepower to mount a defense, then you've just got nothing. You lose everything. And you don't have to talk to very many people to hear stories about people who have spent tens of thousands of dollars, more than $100,000 pursuing this kind of thing, only to have it slip away because either they didn't do the right kind of homework on title verification, or somebody defrauded them and they just don't have the time or resources to fight that. So this process does work out for some people, and we sometimes talk to them, and I'm always happy to hear that it does, and I'm always curious to hear how it does. If they've found a good contractor that will build for them, that's probably somebody we want to be talking to as well. But really, when it does work out, from what I've seen, it's almost like a happy accident, because when people find out about us, they tend to say, oh my gosh, where have you been all my life? I wish I had known about you guys 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever it was before they lost what they lost.
You've given a clear picture of the challenges, so I was hoping we could look at how Jobomax has built a model that directly addresses these issues. You present yourself as a one-stop shop handling land titles, utilities, construction, and the project management overall. Can you walk us through how this model solves specifically the diaspora's pain points?
I'll start speaking to that. I know that Franck has a perspective on this. People say that if you talk to somebody with a hammer in their hand, everything looks like a nail, right? And for us, I think both from the Jobomax side of things, when we started in 2014, and from the Tcheukado side of things, where Franck and John started in 2019, 2020, sorry. When those guys started and when we started, we were two different teams. We were teams that had diaspora members involved in founding the organization and bringing that perspective of the diaspora to the entity. And so the first place we went to look to solve problems was in the diaspora community. On the Jobomax side, we were doing focus groups with diaspora groups here in the greater Philadelphia area and beyond, and realized that, wow, there's a real market here of people who want to invest back home. They have the resources to invest back home, but they don't have a good platform to do it because maybe they want to build a house, but they've heard too many horror stories about people trying to build homes and they don't know how to get started, right? And so we give people like that a way to have a house in 6 months to a year and then pay it off over time, as opposed to paying over the course of many years to maybe get a house at the end of it, right? So we went into this business with the perspective of the diaspora and trying to solve a particular problem for them. And we thought initially the problem was a reliable partner who can handle the land acquisition and construction process from end to end. And that's what we dove into the business to do. Very quickly, we found out that, well, in addition to that problem, there's a financing problem. And so we piloted a financing model on our own balance sheet and then spun that out as a separate financing entity. And then a few years later, created another financing entity so that we have a pipeline of investment to come in to support our home buyers, because 80+% of our sales are financed sales. So we had to build that part of the infrastructure in order to satisfy our first objective, which is to build homes and sell homes and solve this housing problem for people in the diaspora. And then, of course, there's nobody producing an off-the-shelf product at a reasonable cost that allows you to manage a business servicing housing, construction, and home loans to people in the diaspora spread all over the world. So we ended up investing with the head of one of those financing companies to build a fintech platform that we use to manage our customer interface and our underwriting and photos from the job site and all those kinds of things. So we didn't necessarily set out to build this vertically integrated platform, but like a lot of people who are doing business on the continent, we we found that the infrastructure to achieve what we wanted to achieve wasn't quite there. And if we wanted to advance, we were going to have to build it ourselves.
Bob mentioned earlier that our story or our product always resonates with people that have tried to build on their own, whether they're from the diaspora or locally. We just present that solution that will alleviate all the headaches, the difficulties, the losses, or just the lack of, quality or expertise that they probably encountered along the way. And just to take one example, the service of providing land with clean title to a client. That alone, it's a very, very important aspect. I can speak, for like the Cameroonian market, but I'm sure it applies like in many other countries in Africa. You'll go to any court or judicial institution, and at least 80% of the issues that are addressed are land related, land disputes, or people that are buying land with what they thought was clean title, but the title is not clean. But, coming here at Jobomax and, finding a land that already belongs to us because we have gone to a very thorough due diligence procedure to, ensure that the land is clean and that we can buy it. We've set up the land actually to be, for the purpose that it's intended for, by whether it's grading or bringing utilities and water. Those are things that will be even too costly for someone to do it on its own versus having a company that's kind of set it up for them. And, I can continue to go on with the next step of maybe identifying, like finding the right architect for the home that you want to build versus, a company that's already have plans ready available. And I can guide you through that. It's the financial aspect of qualifying you for financing or finding a structure that can be helpful for you. It's the quality, like having, sophisticated engineers to build your homes. And even beyond that, we have, some clients, that are not always here in Africa that want to put it for rent, or like an Airbnb. So we also, will offer to manage the property for them. So being that one-stop shop is it's nice to say, but it's because what Bob said is like we never intended to be a vertically integrated company, but we just became one that just because it's easier to just kind of mitigate a lot of risks and be more efficient that way, to have control over the entire procedures versus having to deal with multiple other people that with not the credibility, the background, or the transparency that we offer to the clients. So that's one thing. That's one reason why we are a one-stop shop, and ultimately it's cost saving. I can't see an individual that will just it will be hard to see someone build more affordably, than going through a company that can kind of like help, take care of all these intangibles that, people are usually not aware of before they go into building a home.
Thank you for sharing that. I guess to enable this end-to-end service, it requires a detailed and almost systematic approach. I was interested to read that you have a rigorous 56-point land title checklist for every property. Why do you believe this level of scrutiny is necessary? And also, how does it protect the buyer?
It's because the devil is in the details. The massive or the extensive checklist that we have, comes from a lot of experience and also obstacles that we've encountered with, land identification. You take, for example, I think that we encountered at some point a mining company that just came and set up, close to a land that we had acquired. So the extensive task list is really to like I said, like cross all the T's and dot all the I's, making sure that we have anticipated every possible things that or obstacles that could come and become a problem along the way. And there are many, like there's just many various issues. Like sometimes you wouldn't even know where like, because the land titles here are not so clear sometimes that you don't know that maybe there's a servitude that has to come across maybe, one of the homes that you've already built. So you have to go back to the land registration company. You have to go to the urban office. You kind of have to do the investigation on your own. And there's many other obstacles like that. The topography, for example, because we are not living in like very advanced or modern cities that already have done all these studies. So you have to do it independently, especially with the heavy rainy seasons that we have here, right? Just to make sure that you're also preventing from like flooding. So it's an extensive process because we still live in a continent that's developing, and there's just a lot of like realities that are not very well formally documented already. So you just kind of have to do the groundwork yourself and make sure that you jumping into the right transaction or business.
Frank's absolutely right. The only thing I'll add is that when we started putting together that process, our initial concern was legality and verifying that from a document perspective, we were getting title that would be defensible and safe to pass on to our buyers. That remains a big concern. But as we've grown, we've also added other concerns, less legalistic and more just about livability. What's the infrastructure situation? How far off the main road are they? What else is around that area? And we're increasingly inviting the sales and the operations and the financing team into that land selection and title and acquisition verification process. Because it's important for the quality of life of the people who buy from us. It's important not only that title be legally defensible, but also that the land be in a livable place. And so we continually try to make sure that we're buying stuff that's going to be good for people for the long run.
Franck, you mentioned that the devil is in the detail. As part of this detailed approach, you build homes to international standards while also using entirely local labor and materials. Is there a level of investment or training required for the local workforce to work to these international standards?
Yes. Let me start off by saying that working here on the ground, you discover that we are blessed with a lot of very talented, intelligent, and capable folks that just need sometimes perspectives, opportunities, and insight, right? Because we are bringing modern construction standards, and I have realized how much growth our local talent has, like demonstrated by just sometimes just getting the right insight, right? Sometimes just teaching them how to be creative and think outside the box and leverage technologies, or AI. Bob's been a very big advocate of, introducing AI in our procedures just to find innovative solutions that are out there, but that is not maybe popular in around us. So, I will say that the proper training and expertise that we're bringing like helps develop our talent, but we also have people that are very receptive and that can also sometimes take those innovative solutions a step further, right? Because truthfully, they're also coming sometimes with some very creative local solutions that you can't think of because, how would you know, for example, the power of like, what do you call it, Bob? Like the dirt bricks?
Yeah.
Yes, and the benefits that they bring, by building the homes. Like sometimes they know it just because that was the more affordable product that they had to use to build their homes. Then you get to learn about the advantages, the benefit that comes to it. And there's just some other obstacles sometimes that you find on the ground where they have just some very innovative or creative ways. So it goes both ways sometimes. But I think that like bringing modern technologies and the know-how definitely helps elevate our local technicians, which is why our results in terms of delivery has always improved, right? The qualities of the home, the timely of the delivery, and everything else that goes around it. Even it's like communication, right? Like just communicating effectively, anticipating some issues, and the project management aspect of it. So that's probably something that they didn't get to have, like, with the training maybe that they received or working with other local companies. But definitely with us, like, we have brought in that empowerment that make them very, very much stronger than when we initially hired them.
Thank you for sharing that. You operate across a range of West African markets, so how do you manage to maintain that consistent quality across a diverse range of countries?
Franck may have more to say about this as head of operations, although we've only been part of the same team since April of this year. So he's had more long-term experience with the delivery of quality construction in Cameroon. He's looking right now at quality in Guinea and Sierra Leone on this trip. But I will say that, look, nothing that we do is easy, but housing construction, when you are a production home builder, building, repeating execution of the same model multiple times, there is variation from place to place. There is variation from team to team. However, to Franck's earlier point, there is no shortage of talent in the field in West Africa. The whether you're talking about Guinea or Sierra Leone or Ghana or Cameroon, there's no shortage of talent in sub-Saharan Africa in general. The problem is that far too often people just don't demand international standards, and people get used to delivering something as substandard, and some of those people will get offended when you tell them that it's substandard and they should do better. Others will not get offended, and they're interested in improving, and those are the kinds of contractors and employees that we like to work with. So that's what I have to say about that.
From the conversation so far, it's clear that you have a model that works. So I was hoping we can now look at what it takes to scale that model and what it means for Africa's economic future. As I mentioned earlier, you work across a range of markets in West Africa, from Guinea, Sierra Leone, Cameroon, Ghana. What have been the biggest cross-border obstacles that you've experienced so far?
I will just go back to what we said earlier. Our biggest obstacle is the same obstacle that is the biggest obstacle for just about anybody that wants to invest in the continent, particularly wants to invest in the continent into solving big problems like housing. And that problem is a lack of access to long-term capital on affordable terms. We are currently raising money to try to expand our housing finance business because we see the expansion of housing finance as the pathway to opening up the housing market, because the big part of the reason the market is stuck right now is that people cannot afford to build because they don't have access to the kinds of products that are common in other parts of the world. I mean, people don't have to look back that far in history. 100 years ago, the population dynamics of the U.S. and the home ownership dynamics of the U.S. were not that different from what they are in West Africa right now. And what happened? They introduced federal loan guarantees for housing finance. They introduced a 30-year mortgage, and they created a financial infrastructure that made it affordable for people to invest in housing. And what happened in the following 40 years? Home ownership rates shot up, poverty rates shot down. You can see that pattern repeat anywhere a credible system is put in place that makes it possible for people to access capital for housing finance on sustainable terms. So that is the key obstacle. We are trying to raise money in a market where people would like to get in and out very quickly. If you're raising money in Africa now to finance a motorcycle loan, something where an investor can hop in and out and make their 18 to 20% and wash their hands of it and walk away, there's plenty of money for that kind of thing. The harder thing is to find people that look at and care about the multiplier effect of investment in housing and housing finance and care about job creation and say, yeah, look, I'm happy to accept 9%, 10%, just on the financing or up into the teens if you're kind of blending an investment in financing and housing, because they see the power of being there long term and supporting the sector long term. And those are the kinds of investors we're looking for, people that are ready to commit long term to the continent and who have expectations for financial return that are aligned with an understanding of the broader social impact that they have by making investments in that sector.
A challenge or obstacle often experienced in these markets is currency volatility for diaspora clients who are maybe earning in USD, euros, pounds, but want to invest locally. Exchange rate risk can be a major concern. So how does Jobomax mitigate this risk or challenge?
I mean, the short answer is that we push that risk to somebody else. The contracts that we write for financing are written in U.S. dollar terms. In rare cases have we diverged and done some other currencies. Those tend to be shorter term contracts. But our financing, our standard financing arrangement is a 10-year term with a 30% down payment and a 12% annual interest rate to the buyer. Sometimes that changes depending on certain circumstances, but the bulk of people who have taken financing from us have a deal similar to that or exactly that. And those are U.S. dollar contracts, and they are written in the U.S. And so whether you're earning U.S. dollars or Canadian dollars or Australian dollars or euros or Korean won or British pounds, you're signing up to that kind of payment term. Now, the fluctuation between the dollar and these other OECD currencies has not been that dramatic in the past 10 years. Frankly, it's not been particularly dramatic versus the Guinea franc in the past few years. And so, to expand that financing program, we need, on the one hand, more investment into the vehicles that do U.S. dollar financings, but we are also trying to grow a business in doing local currency financing, be that in partnership with local banks. And we do believe that there are a number of banks in the region who are really prepared to take mortgage lending beyond pamphlets and brochures and discussions and actually start doing it. And we're excited to work with them on that. But then there are also private entities that are interested in investing in local currency financing, particularly at the lower end of the income scale. And so we're piloting a partnership for that kind of thing in Guinea for local currency financing. Those kinds of things would be set up in such a way that currency risk is less of a question because you're trying to get local currency financing into the vehicle for a local currency return. On the dollar side, at this point, the way we've managed that is by just writing dollar contracts and having having the people, if people are earning other currencies, they're taking the currency risk. The investors do not.
So keeping on the theme of financing and investing, do you see a future where African housing actually becomes attractive to institutional investors?
Well, I'm banking on that future. Franck has worked more closely with our colleague John, who comes from that institutional investment background. So, Franck, you may have a view on this.
Yeah, no, I'm also banking on it, Bob. And it's already happening. It's growing. And the biggest obstacle right now is navigating the ambiguity, right? Not only the skepticism, also just having the right infrastructures to guide those private equity and investment firms. Like all the key stakeholders will have to maybe step up a little bit, whether it's like the government, the banks, and just make sure that they raise the bar a little bit up to international standards, right? And that will kind of facilitate things. But it's already happening, and we see a lot of growth in that area. I'm sure even the statistics will support my statement of the growth of foreign direct investment into the country. We're dealing with some obstacles Bob was mentioning, but overall, Africa is a continent in full development, full expansion, and with a very young demographic. So it's only right to bank on it and contribute in the growth, and it has benefits from like different areas, right? You're talking about the social benefits of doing so, the financial like returns that are very attractive, right, compared to other developed nations. So it just makes right to use, for investors to use their money wisely, not only by helping a continent that in such big needs of growth and development, but also justifying the return on investment while doing so.
I'd like to shift the conversation towards practical advice for the listeners, especially those thinking about building back home. So for someone in the diaspora who's dreaming of owning a home back home, what is the one thing they should do first?
They should just do it. Just do it.
Do it with the right partner.
Exactly. Just do it, and do it with the right partner. And at Jobomax, we offer flexible programs, right, for people that intending to invest or build a home but are not quite ready. So there's a way to progressively move funds into the down payment. I think Bob can better explain that program, so that eventually at some point, once we collect the percentage that we require to build, then we go ahead and build. So for us, we like to bring solutions, right? And no matter what the circumstance, it's just to do it, and do it with the right partner, start collaborating, communicating, and see how we can make that dream come true, whether it's now in the future.
Building a home is often an investment for the future. So if we look ahead, look to the future, you guys have built over 150 homes and financed over 120 clients. So what's the long-term vision for Jobomax over the next 5 to 10 years?
The money we're raising now is to support expansion in the markets that we're in, as well as a couple of additional markets in the region. We see ourselves as having growth opportunities initially, primarily between Senegal and Cameroon. We're sort of already in that space, and there are countries in the region, particularly Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Nigeria as well, where we have looked at land, looked at projects, and have partners that we may launch something with as we go forward. So, but that's the idea. We think we have a model that works not just for the countries where we already are, but could work more broadly. And the tech platform that we've built to help manage this stuff is not limited to us. We think, in fact, we are currently talking to some banks in the region about how they could use that platform to do their own financing directly of diaspora buyers as well as local buyers. So we see growth not just in the home building business, but in the financing and in the prop tech fintech platform that we've built that would enable lots more builders and lots more funding providers to be able to have impact in this space. We think the opportunity is practically limitless. Just earlier you were asking about attracting institutional investment, and it's I think some people talk about property in emerging markets and they look at China and think about the overbuilding problem there and the collapse of some of those things. And the thing people need to realize is Africa is not China today from an investment opportunity perspective. It's China 30 or 40 years ago. So like people who wait until the investment opportunity is obvious will come in and will invest, but they won't be nearly as profitable as people that are investing now.
If we zoom out and look at the wider picture, how do you expect diaspora investment into West African real estate to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years?
My expectation is that it should continue to grow, right? The demand is real and population continue to grow. So I'm expecting Africans from the diaspora to be more aware today and tomorrow than they were yesterday. And I expect them to be a little bit courageous, right? Take courage, do your homework, your due diligence, and go with the right company, right? And that should be Jobomax. And yes, we can definitely whether it's like an investment or like building a home, we can make it happen. And we have done so for many others. And, we have testimonials that, or people we think probably refer them to just so that they can get in a little bit of comfort. But it's expected to grow, because if it doesn't, then I don't see how our economy will ever thrive, right? We need to start building successful communities with a promising future. And that starts with potentially Africans from the diaspora coming to like lend a hand and also being present and participating in the job creation that comes with it, or the urban expansion that definitely always has a multiplier effect from a commercial standpoint, right? The different shops that can come and set up in the neighborhood once you have maybe 5-10 homes that are already built. So it's definitely to take courage and do it, especially that Jobomax also assists with financing, right? The clients will go through a financial qualification, and we can finance them to build a home now and be able to repay later, which is, a mortgage product that's very popular, right? Like, across the world. And we're starting to push people to believe and to see that it's also possible here in Africa.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Last question.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, African proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
I certainly do. I was interviewing a candidate for a sales job yesterday, and I told her the same thing I'm going to tell you, which is that we like to quote Bruce Lee here and say, "Be like water," because the obstacles are fast and furious, and you've got to be flexible, and you've got to find a way. Whether it's over, under, around, or through, you got to come to business with that spirit if you want to play in this space.
As a huge martial arts and Bruce Lee fan, I really appreciate that quote. Franck, your turn.
Yeah, I actually just learned this one about 3 weeks ago from my father, who was telling me stories about my late great-grandmother that I got to meet actually before she passed. She had a say about when you have to work on the field, make sure you go really early so that by the time the sun comes up and is way up above your head and you're exhausted, you would have already accomplished a lot, and then you can go home. So it really resonated with me. And I can kind of like relate that to the early pioneers in this industry that we're talking about, are people that are skeptical and are not ready to, or not willing to come and invest in Africa or to build in Africa. There's no better time than now, because in the future, as you don't have as much strength or whether any other obstacles could come along the way, at least you can say that I'm glad I got to do it. I'm glad I did it. So I'm happy to share that quote because it's been sitting in my head for the last 3 weeks, and it's good that you asked. But I always encourage, especially the young population, from the diaspora, to step up, because we all talk about it. We always talk about it. I have friends from the diaspora, and the conversation is always, oh, I want to invest in Africa. I want to do this. I want to do that. But you don't see a lot of them doing it. So if you don't know where to start, come to Jobomax. We can start maybe by building you a home, right? And that could serve as maybe a rental property. You can be an investor or whatever it is. We are here and we are, open to collaborate and to make the effort to collectively work hard to see our continent thrive and grow and meet its full potential that we always know.
Thank you for that, Robert and Franck. Thank you for joining us and for sharing such powerful insights on how strategic housing investment can unlock Africa's economic potential. And I think it's clear that the work that you're doing is also catalyzing skills development, improving property rights in terms of the transparency, and also mobilizing diaspora wealth for long-term development. So great job, great work, Jobomax. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tersa. It's nice to have the opportunity to speak with you.
I appreciate the time. Thanks for having us, and look forward to continue this conversation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you, and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.